Alright everybody, I'm back with another tutorial. This one's for Steampunk Minotaur Legs. I do these videos because the more parties I go to, I've run into people that have actually tried making these legs. I also get a lot of positive feedback from people that have seen the videos. This is my 5th tutorial, and it'll probably be my last for the legs as I return to making other costumes. Each tutorial covers a different shape and size of legs, so between the 5, you should have more than enough information to branch off and start making your own. I've been making costumes for years. I love attending Halloween parties, costume events. Some of the costumes have been good, some not so good, but I love being around creative people. Believe it or not, I am not infatuated with Minotaurs or Satyrs. The only reason I got involved with these legs was about 10 years ago. I saw it as a personal challenge. I simply wanted to dress as a satyr for a Renaissance festival, but I was not impressed with the type of legs I was seeing out there. None of them truly looked like a horse. So I set out about 5 years ago to develop my own. It worked, and that's how I started making these tutorials. My legs aren't better or worse than anybody else's that puts a lot of time into them. However, I'm giving you an option that's comfortable and doesn't require a lot of balance. Let's do a quick overview of some of the legs that I've made. The fawn from my first video only requires fur, foam, and adding a hoof to a boot. It's probably the most comfortable, easiest to make, and lightest to wear. My original satyr. This video has a lot of good tips, shows a good way to build the armor. Overall, I really enjoyed the costume, but I wasn't quite happy with the leg angles, and I feel like I've improved those in later versions. My original Krampus legs. These things are great and have lasted for years. This video expands on how to build the armor, the mask, the legs, and overall it was a good costume. 2 years ago, I gave that Krampus costume a major lift. I upgraded the legs, armor, mask, and overall this is my favorite Minotaur. If I was building my first set of legs, I needed a picture, I would copy the angles on these legs. They work perfectly. The armored Minotaur I did as a challenge to myself. I wanted to get away from using hair to hide the legs and boots. It worked. If you're going to do a project involving space armor or anything futuristic, this might be the model you want to center on. The deer. I just wanted to create something nobody ever saw before, and these leg angles work great, so go ahead and copy them. The steampunk legs were my final challenge. I wanted to see if I could strip away the armor and the fur and still hide the shape of my leg. It worked, and that's what this tutorial is all about. A quick note on naming this project. Originally I was going to call it the War Machine, but Marvel already has a War Machine. Because of Tony, he already has metal legs, so I'm sure there's copyright issues there. Then, because I was looking at mechanical horses, I was going to call it the War Horse. Even named it that on my computer. Then it struck me, I'm not the war horse, I'm the Terminator.
The Terminator!
Okay, before we build, let's do a quick review of my only rule, so you don't look off balance like this guy. Have you ever wondered why some costume legs look off balance? I apply one rule when making my legs, and that is that the knee has to be centered over the hoof. If you do this, it'll appear that your body weight is being carried forward by the hoof and the front leg. If you don't line up the knee with the hoof, then you may appear to be leaning backwards. Let me show you how that rule applies. In each of these examples, the red line represents where the human leg actually is, followed by the fake knee that's built out over the hoof, and then a reverse joint built up behind the leg. All of this combined will give you the illusion of balance. All right, let's start building. First thing you're going to need is a boot. The boot has to be zip in and zip out. The height of it is your choice. Next, the wastebasket is going to become my hoof. I chose a wastebasket because I needed something that was a little blocky looking, so it was mechanical. Now, personal preference, I carved a little bit of the heel off the boot. This will help me to hide it later. Now, I cut the shape of the wastebasket into the hoof I want. Now what you're seeing here is I've taken a rigid plastic pipe, cut it so that my leg will fit in the center, and then I bolted it right to the boot at the proper angle that I want so that the angle can't change. This is a very important improvement. I used to, on the pivot point for the hoof, screw it directly into the insole. Those screws or bolts, after 6 or 8 hours a day, used to work themselves out slightly. I even had one fall out. So now I strongly suggest running a bolt, if you're able to, straight through the sole of the boot to act as your pivot point for the hoof. Now let's address another improvement I came up with. I call it the toe stop. I was lucky enough to catch myself stubbing my toe on video. Without a toe stop, stubbing your toe like this can actually force the hoof under your foot and cause you major problems. These fawn boots are old enough that I can actually force the hoof to over-rotate, exposing the toe and showing you the problem that could occur. One of my Minotaurs has a toe stop that consists of a plastic tube going across, and it gets stopped by this aluminum shelf bracket. The pair I'm making now has a simple aluminum bracket screwed to the sole, bent slightly at the top. The top of that bracket sits inside of the wastebasket and prevents the wastebasket from rotating downwards. Next, I add the second segment of the leg with a bolt as a pivot point. And now the top part of the leg with a bolt as a pivot point. Notice that the knee is in line over the hoof, and these pivot points will create movement that distract people from seeing where your leg actually is. It's important that you try these parts on continuously throughout the process. You're checking for rub spots or anything that will cause you irritation, because you're going to wear these for hours. Now during this test walk, you can see how the outline of my leg is already disappearing. The hoof is moving somewhat natural, and the pivot points are distracting the eyeball from actually picking out where your human leg is. It's time to make the legs look mechanical. I want to show you some of the parts that I use to do this. Let's talk about weight. You're going to want to keep this as light as possible. That's why for the tubes, I chose to use dollar store squirt guns. And then I went to the hardware store and I got vacuum cleaner extension tubes, because both are very lightweight. Believe it or not, even though I could have used PVC tubing, it's very dense and heavy. Next, I went to the Walmart summer clearance aisle and I bought myself 6 kids' lawnmowers. And then finally I went over to the dollar store and bought a few odds and ends that I thought might look good. And here's an overview of where everything ended up. Tubes all over the place. I cannibalized those lawnmowers, put the parts here and there, dollar store parts here and there, and the hooves, if you're looking at them, I added some pyramids, which were some odd shapes I found, and then I encased everything on the hoof in Warbler so it doesn't fall apart. I wanted the knee to have a lot of movement and be see-through, so I took an old pair of carpenter's knee pads, cut them up, and attached them. And now it's time to take that hot Lego looking mess for a test walk and make sure you don't have any rub spots and everything's working well. It's time to camouflage the leg and boot. This is done in my black Minotaur and deer Minotaur with the fur and the knee armor, which both create movement and distract the eye as well as hiding the boot. The armored Minotaur hides the shape of the leg with the armored plates, as well as a couple plates I added on pivot points just to create extra movement. The knee is centered over the hoof. We have to hide the shaft of the boot. Normally, I have fur that drapes down and creates movement right here, and that camouflages the shaft of your boot. This time, I'm going to be building the structure up. I'm going to be using flex tubing and actuator tubes that'll be added on here to make the outline of the leg disappear. Same with the heel. We're going to build out some plates here and little bit here, and we're gonna put some tubing like this, and it'll flex when we walk, and that'll take away the outline of the boot and make people concentrate more on believing that there's a gap here. Actually, a lot of people think that when I'm wearing these, my knee is actually bent into here. Here's a look at the black flex tubing that I'm using to camouflage my leg and boot. Once it's added, then I spray paint everything black, and it's time to take it for a test walk. After a successful test walk, this bad boy is ready for paint, and here's what the paint job looks like. A quick overview of how some of the other parts were made. Shoulders, I start with a set of football shoulder pads, because why reinvent something? And then I add to it. This is covered in other videos. I use sonotubes. I cut them into shape, add the layers. They're put together with Chicago screws until I have the armor that I want. Once the shape is right, then I trim the edges, in this case with black flex tubing. Add some more lawnmower heads for that steampunk look, and then it gets good paint job afterwards. The crossbow cannon on my shoulder, that was made by buying a Nerf gun, chopping it up, adding some hair curlers for flash suppressors. I cut up a kid's bow and arrow set to make the crossbow portion, and then some gutter parts simulated the quiver and ammo can that were located on my back. My mask making is covered in other videos. This is actually the third time I'm using this mask. It's been repurposed every time. It started as my Satyr mask, then it became my Minotaur mask after it got a horn and a nose job, and now I've cut it all up, given it a nose job, and I always wanted a bullet mohawk, so this bad boy got a bullet mohawk. And if you notice, I bought about 33 chapsticks to make the longer bullets in the center. Lastly, I wanted an aiming device for the shoulder cannon, so I took an old pair of illuminated sunglasses I have, cut them in half, made my aiming device, gave the mask a paint job, and it's all done. The tail was easy. I took some plastic kids grenades, added some spikes to one, strung them together on wire with rigid tubing in between, and I ended up with the best steampunk Minotaur tail you've ever seen. For years, I've been attending costume, Halloween, and Krampus parties during all seasons, and lately I've been going to all the Renaissance festivals because I just can't believe how accommodating and friendly the people are. I hope you can get out there and enjoy yourself, and don't forget to do the sexy Minotaur strut when you're trying to get the queen's attention. Do me a favor, if these videos helped you at all, post a link to your work in the comments. I'd love to see what you've done. This type of leg isn't just limited to furry creatures. I'm waiting for somebody to send me a link to their dragon costume or alien queen. Anything's possible. I want to see what you guys do. This will probably be the last in my series of leg tutorials because I just feel like personally I met the challenge and then I pushed it a little further by dropping the fur and going robotic with it, and I proved to myself it could be done. But in the future, I got some other costumes in mind, and I'll probably do some tutorials on those as well. So thank you for all the great feedback, and thanks for all the kind words in person. And I really love hanging with the kids. Kids can be the high point of my day. I love having my picture taken with them, and it's fist bumps for everyone. Sometimes at the end of the day, I take my costume off in the parking lot, come back into the festivals just to reconnect and revisit with all the wonderful people I met.
Not really. I love taking pictures with kids. Your kids want a picture with me. They did before. No, I love pictures with kids. I do. Your kid. You want a picture of him with me? Hey, before you go to the bathroom, you wanted a picture with me, right? I always fist bump kids. Your kid, he wants fist bump.